Pennsylvania boy, as a matter of fact. We're visiting this morning with Brian Seitchik. Brian, sorry about messing your name up there.
All good. Brian Seitchik, thank you.
I'm young at this. And our conversation is brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted best personal injury law firm in the Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. So Scranton, huh?
I'm from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I grew up there, and my dad still lives there, and I get back as often as I can.
Yeah, well, we're in the other half of the state here, but we appreciate Scranton only because they have our team, the Penguins, out there. So
fair enough.
It's all
fair
good.
Enough.
It's all good. Hey, we want to talk to you about inflation. The Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, appearing before Congress this week. And it was rather contentious as he talked about inflation and the measures that he and others have been trying to ease the inflation and the pushback on some of those measures, particularly talking about the unemployment rate with Mr. Kennedy. And that was a fascinating bit of conversation. Mr. Kennedy making the point that in order for the Fed to do what they want to do to ease the inflation, they have to drive up unemployment, and that just isn't a very good formula. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And I think what we have here also is a very fundamental difference between Republicans and Democrats and how we got here. During that same testimony, Democrats continued to assert that this inflation is a result of the old boogeyman, corporate price gouging, and the war in Russia and Ukraine, ignoring the fact that this last Congress spent like drunken sailors, spent trillions of dollars. The government had to print trillions of dollars to pay for all of the big programs that they passed. And no one is talking about that. I mean, we were supposed to see a slowdown in interest rates. We went up a quarter last time. The talk was going up a quarter, maybe a quarter of a point again. Now we're back to talking about a half a point or 3/4 of a point. And this has a real impact on everyday Americans. This means it costs more for auto loans and mortgage rates and paying credit card debt. And increased mortgage rates are really important because it decreases opportunity for Americans. It says if they have a new opportunity in a new city or a new state, they may not be able to afford to buy a house to do so. That mobility is part of the success of the American dream, and that is really problematic here. I mean, at the end of the day, what they're doing is not working, and the Fed asserts that raising interest rates is really their only tool here. But that assumes that they have to do it. I'm a believer in market forces. Maybe we just take a step back and let the market work itself out by just standing pat. Because do you know today that if you were to buy a house, your monthly mortgage payment would be twice as high as it was a year ago? That is just creating a lot of difficulty for regular Americans. Let's also couple the fact that right now, your dollar is worth 4 to 6% less than a year ago. So you may be working the same amount, being paid the same amount of money, but you're actually getting less value out of that dollar. And that is not what creates incentive for entrepreneurship and for Americans on a regular basis.
We've certainly felt the effects. I mean, housing is one thing for those who are in the market for a house or trying to sell one, and cars as well, availability and market supply. But really, we're seeing it in everyday life too, at the grocery stores and the various products that we need for our everyday lives. That's where inflation is really beaten up on folks a little bit as well. And the Fed has those raised interest rates, the effect of them. What would be a better, for you, a better way of approaching the inflationary problem? You did say just let the market take care of it.
I think we need to just stand pat because clearly we have had a radical increase in rates over the last year, and it really hasn't helped. There was some indication that inflation may have cooled at the end of 2022, but the January reports that it is back red hot again. So again, pardon me, I don't understand why we keep raising rates at this clip if it's not having the effect. If we just stop the government's I should not stop the government spending. That seems impossible, but at least reduce the rate of increased government spending. Stop printing so much money. Stop raising interest rates and let the market forces just take over. This will work itself out. But this continuing tinkering by Chairman Powell is just not working.
The amount of money that we have actually printed in the last 5 or 6 years has just been tremendous, and of course that's contributed mightily to the inflation problem. What is the long-term effect of having all that extra money out there on the market?
People work longer for less. Your dollar simply does not go as far. And to your point about purchasing eggs and milk and going to the grocery store, just the cost of feeding your family costs anywhere from 8 to 10% more than it did a year ago. That is very serious. That does not give people an opportunity to get a new job or to try a new business, which has always been the engine of this economy and this country is small businesses and entrepreneurship. High inflation doesn't allow people that opportunity, and that's a serious problem. And then people just have less money to spend on what they want because all of it is going towards housing and food and things like that, and they just don't have the choices in America that they should have.
Mr. Powell making the point that there have been 7 straight months of year-over-year disinflation, that inflation is finally we're getting a grip on it, but he said that it's going to be a slow process. Is he right about that?
Well, I think that streak may be broken next month. I think there's talk of inflation being increased again. But again, the fact that we're talking about back to raising interest rates a half a point to 3/4 of a point when we were at a quarter point last time means what they're doing is not working. They need to try something new. And I think one thing that, again, we're not talking enough about is reducing government spending. I mean, the trillions of dollars injected into the economy last year is going to have an appreciable impact. But no one's talking about that. Instead, they're talking about the unemployment rate and corporate price gouging, and this is the Russians' fault. And I'm sure all of that on some level contributes, but the big ticket item here is spending by Washington. There's no accountability among our politicians with the spending in Washington. And as we move to the debt ceiling conversation, and that has an impact on the economy, all of a sudden it's going to be all the Republicans' fault. Everything is the Republicans' fault for trying to reduce government spending, as if they're the ones that caused this problem.
Brian Seitchik, our guest here this morning on Indiana in the Morning. We're talking about the inflation that has been plaguing the United States for quite some time now. Brian, when we think about the national debt and the interest that our nation must pay, obviously if you're getting your money or paying your money for that, you're not paying it for things that maybe more traditionally we want our government to be involved in. What are some of the things that fall short because of all of the national debt?
Well, we spend so much on our national debt every year, and the number has become so large it almost doesn't feel real to people. But imagine what we could do with all of that. We could modernize our defense system. We could spend money on things that have a long-term effect. An example: everyone always talks about climate change, and there's some stories recently about how the Biden administration chose their focus on climate change over energy security. But imagine if we had the resources to figure out how to improve the environment with all these extra resources, and we made a business out of it and something that we could sell to the world. I mean, there's just so many innovative things you can do with resources, with research, biotech, medical research, pharmaceutical. Those dollars, if we can provide tax cuts for corporations to invest in growing their business and trying to be the leader in all these things around the world, would it help America, would also help the world, because we'd have all these new innovative resources and the best minds focused on it. Instead, we're spending trillions of dollars a year on interest, which feels like just money down the drain to pay for spending that happened yesterday and the day before. And we keep doing it. Again, we just do not seem to learn our lesson. There is nothing free. Just because the Congress last cycle decides to pass it and agrees to spend it, doesn't mean it's free. It comes at a price, and it comes at a price of present and future generations.
Brian, what you've been telling us here this morning reminds me of a feature we had earlier this morning. We were talking about senior citizens and what they have learned through life and correcting mistakes. And the one person said this: if you always do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got. That seems to sum it all up, doesn't it?
It sure does, and yet it's always a bit of a shock when that happens. I don't know why, but it always feels like a shock to the system for some.
Oh, man. Brian Seitchik, thanks so much for being with us this morning. What's it like there in Scottsdale?
It's beautiful. It's going to be about 75 degrees today, 72 degrees, so it's pretty nice out here. Sun is already out and shining.
What the heck made you think we needed to hear that?
I can't help it. I live in paradise. It is what it is.
Have a great day today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160.